Jake Martinez floated through the long white hallway of Galactic University Station Epsilon 7. His stomach felt weird from the artificial gravity, but he tried not to show it. This was his first day at the most famous university in the galaxy. Only 3 humans had ever been accepted here before him. The hallway was huge, much bigger than anything on Earth. Strange creatures moved past him in all directions. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others looked like walking crystals that sparkled when they moved. A few were so tall that Jake had to bend his neck back to see their faces. Room 847B, Jake said to himself, reading the numbers on his schedule. He looked at the doors as he passed. 843B, 844B, 845B. Almost there. A blue creature with 6 arms was coming toward him. It moved like it was swimming through the air. Jake had seen pictures of this species before. They were called the Velinari. They lived in water worlds and were supposed to be really smart at math. "Excuse me," Jake said. "Do you know where room 847B is?" The blue creature stopped. Its big round eyes looked at Jake for a long moment. "You are the new human," it said. Its voice sounded like bubbles popping. "I am Velinari. I go to the same class. Follow me." Jake followed the floating blue creature down the hall. "What class is it?" he asked. "Advanced Theoretical Physics," Velinari answered. "It is taught by Professor Zilfek. He is very difficult. Most students fail his class." Jake's heart sank a little. He was good at physics back on Earth, but this was different. This was alien physics. What if he wasn't smart enough? They reached room 847B. The door was twice as tall as Jake and made of some kind of metal that changed colors. Velinari touched it with one of its 6 hands, and the door slid open. The classroom was enormous. The ceiling was so high that Jake couldn't see it clearly. Strange students sat at desks that floated in the air. Some desks were filled with water for the aquatic species. Others were super hot for the rock creatures. A few were just empty space where gas beings floated around. "Human student," a voice said. It sounded like breaking glass. "You will sit here." Jake looked around and saw a tall crystal creature pointing at an empty desk. This must be Professor Zilfek. The professor was made of what looked like clear diamond, but with colors moving inside like a kaleidoscope. Jake walked to his desk and sat down. The chair was comfortable, but it felt strange. It seemed to read his body and change shape to fit him perfectly. "Class will begin," Professor Zilfek announced. The crystal professor moved to the front of the room. When it walked, it made tiny. Ringing sounds like wind chimes. Jake looked around at his classmates. There was Velinari, the blue swimming creature. Next to it sat something that looked like a giant ant, but with glowing eyes. In the back, a creature made of what appeared to be living smoke was floating in a special container. "Today we have a new student," Professor Zilfek said. "Jake Martinez from the planet Earth. Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world. This means it is extremely dangerous for most life forms." Several students turned to stare at Jake. He felt his face get hot. He didn't like being the center of attention. "Professor," the ant-like creature spoke up. Its voice sounded like many voices talking at once. "How does a being from a death world survive long enough to learn?" Professor Zilfek's colors shifted to what Jake thought might be amusement. "An excellent question, Krexter. Perhaps our human student can explain during our semester." Jake wanted to sink into his chair. He just wanted to learn, not be some kind of exhibit. "Now," Professor Zilfek continued, "let us begin with today's lesson. We will study the mathematics of projectile motion and variable gravity fields." The professor waved one of its crystal hands. Suddenly, complex equations appeared in the air above everyone's desks. Jake had never seen anything like it. Numbers and symbols floated and moved around like they were alive. This is one of the most challenging concepts in physics, Professor Zilthak explained. When an object is launched from a rotating platform, and that platform exists in a gravity field that changes strength, the mathematics become incredibly complex. Jake looked at the floating equations. They were long and complicated, with symbols he didn't recognize. But as he studied them, something clicked in his mind. This was just like the physics problems he did in high school. Maybe with some extra steps, but the basic idea was the same. Your assignment, Professor Zilthak announced, is to calculate the optimal trajectory for a projectile launched from such a platform. You will have 2 weeks to complete this task. It requires advanced mathematical modeling and theoretical framework development. Around the room, students began making worried sounds. Velinari's blue skin turned a darker shade of blue. Crexter's many eyes started blinking rapidly. Even the smoke creature seemed to swirl faster in its container. Jake stared at the problem. 2 weeks? It looked like something he could probably figure out in a few hours. Back home, his physics teacher, Mr. Johnson, gave them problems like this all the time. You just had to account for the spinning motion and the changing gravity. It wasn't that hard. Is there a problem, human student? Professor Zilthak asked. Jake realized he had been staring at the equations for several minutes, while everyone else looked panicked. No, sir, he said quickly. It looks manageable. The entire classroom went silent. Even Professor Zilthak's colors stopped moving for a moment. Manageable? Velinari whispered, its voice full of disbelief. Jake suddenly realized he might have said something wrong. He looked around at all the worried faces staring at him. Maybe this problem was harder than he thought. Maybe he was missing something. Important. Jake said quickly. It looks challenging. Very challenging. But inside, he was thinking that he might have this done by tomorrow night. How hard could it be? Jake sat in his small dorm room that night, looking at the physics problem on his tablet. The equations still floated in the air above the screen, just like they had in class. He had turned down the lights so he could see them better. His room was basic but comfortable. The university had given him furniture that could change to fit human needs. The bed was soft, and the desk was the right height. Through his window, he could see the stars and other ships moving around the space station. Jake picked up a stylus and started working on the problem. First, he needed to understand what was happening. A projectile was being shot from a spinning platform. The gravity was changing as it moved. He needed to find the best angle and speed to hit a target. Okay, Jake said to himself. This is just like throwing a baseball from a moving car. He thought about all the times he had played catch with his dad back on Earth. When you threw a ball while you were running, you had to aim differently than when you were standing still. The ball would go in a curve because you were moving. This problem was similar, but instead of running in a straight line, the platform was spinning. And instead of regular gravity, the gravity was changing. But the basic idea was the same. Jake started with the simple equations he had learned in high school. Force equals mass times acceleration. Velocity equals distance divided by time. He wrote them down on his tablet. Meanwhile, 3 floors up, Velinari was floating in its water-filled room. The blue creature had covered every wall with complex mathematical formulas. Its 6 arms moved quickly, writing equation after equation. The rotational dynamics require a 47-dimensional matrix, Velinari muttered to itself. Then I must account for the variable gravitational field using quantum mechanics principles. The aquatic being had been working for 6 hours straight. Its calculations covered thousands of lines. Each step required careful mathematical proof. One small mistake would ruin everything. In another part of the station, Crexter sat in a room filled with humming machines. The insect-like creature was actually made up of hundreds of smaller beings that shared one mind. Right now it had dedicated 200 of its drone minds to solving the physics problem. The drones worked together, each one handling a different part of the calculation. Some worked on the spinning motion. Others focused on the changing gravity. A few specialized drones handled the advanced mathematics. Computational analysis at 47%, Crexter said to itself in its many-voiced way. Estimated. Completion time, 11 days, 14 hours. Back in his room, Jake was having a much easier time. He had broken the problem down into simple parts. First, he calculated how the spinning platform would affect the projectile. Then he figured out how the changing gravity would bend its path. It's just like shooting a basketball while riding a merry-go-round, Jake thought. Except the merry-go-round is in space, and gravity is weird. He used the basic kinematic equations from his high school physics book. The math wasn't too complicated. He had to account for something called the Coriolis effect, which happened when things rotated. His physics teacher had explained it using a spinning playground ride. Jake also remembered playing miniature golf with his sister. Some of the holes had moving hearts or slopes that changed. You had to think about how the ball would move differently on each part of the course. This problem was similar. After 2 hours of work, Jake had his answer. He double-checked his calculations 3 times. Everything looked right. The optimal angle was 23.7 degrees above horizontal. The initial velocity should be 847 meters per second. The projectile would follow a curved path and hit the target perfectly. That wasn't so bad, Jake said, stretching his arms. He saved his work and got ready for bed. Dr. Yithara, a gaseous being who taught quantum mechanics, was still awake in her special atmospheric chamber. She had heard about the assignment from Professor Zil-Thak. Even she was curious about how to solve it. The quantum uncertainty principle must be applied to each gravitational variance, she said to herself. Her voice sounded like wind whistling through leaves. This requires integration across multiple probability fields. Dr. Yuthara had been working on the problem as a personal challenge. She was one of the smartest beings in the galaxy, but she expected to need at least a week to solve it properly. Meanwhile, Nexual, a silicon-based student, was using the university's most powerful computers. The rock-like being had requested processing time on machines that could perform billions of calculations per second. Error in dimensional analysis, the computer announced. Recalculating matrix inversions. Nexual had been feeding equations into the computer for hours. Each attempt revealed new levels of complexity. The math was so complicated that even supercomputers were struggling. Estimated processing time, 6 days, 12 hours. The computer reported. Jake woke up the next morning feeling refreshed. He had slept well and was ready for his second day of classes. He got dressed, ate breakfast in the cafeteria, and headed to his advanced theoretical physics class. The cafeteria had been interesting. He had seen students eating things he couldn't identify. Some breathed their food instead of chewing it. Others absorbed nutrients directly through their skin. Jake was happy to stick with something that looked like scrambled eggs. When Jake arrived at class, he noticed that many of his classmates looked tired. Velinari's blue skin seemed pale. Crexter's eyes weren't as bright as usual. Even the smoke creature appeared less active in its container. "Good morning, class," Professor Zilfek announced. The crystal professor's colors were shifting in complex patterns. "I hope you have made progress on yesterday's assignment." Several students made unhappy sounds. Someone in the back of the room actually groaned. "Professor," Velinari said, "could we have an additional week to complete the calculations? The mathematical complexity is beyond anything we have encountered. A theoretical framework alone requires extensive development," added Crexter. Professor Zilthik's color shifted. to what Jake thought might be amusement. The assignment deadline remains unchanged. 2 weeks from yesterday. Jake raised his hand. Professor, should we submit our work through the computer system? Yes, human student. All assignments are submitted electronically. Professor Zilthuk paused. Do you have a question about the problem itself? No, sir, Jake said. I just wanted to make sure I submitted it correctly. Jake pulled out his tablet and uploaded his solution to the class system. It took about 30 seconds. The classroom became very quiet. Professor Zilthek's colors stopped moving entirely. Human student, the professor said slowly. Did you just submit your completed assignment? Yes, sir, Jake replied. Is that okay? I know it's early, but I finished it last night. The silence in the room was so complete that Jake could hear the humming of the space station's air recycling system. Every single student was staring at him with whatever they used for eyes. Jake suddenly wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Professor Zilthek stood perfectly still for a long moment. The crystal being's colors had stopped moving completely, which Jake was beginning to understand meant the professor was either very surprised or very upset. Class dismissed, Professor. Zilthek announced suddenly. Human student, please remain. Jake watched as his classmates filed out of the room. Valinari floated past him, its 6 arms moving in what looked like confusion. Krexter's many eyes all stared at Jake as the insect-like being walked by. Even the smoke creature seemed to swirl in an agitated way. When the room was empty, Professor Zilthek moved closer to Jake's desk. The crystal professor's footsteps made soft ringing sounds on the floor. Jake Martinez, the professor said, you submitted a 2-page solution to a problem that typically requires weeks of advanced theoretical work. Jake felt his stomach drop. Is that bad? Did I do something wrong? That remains to be determined. Professor Zilthek's colors began moving again, but slowly. I will review your work. If you have somehow cheated or used unauthorized computational assistance, you will be expelled from the university. Jake's face went pale. Professor, I didn't cheat. I just used basic physics equations, the same ones I learned in high school. Professor Zilthek's colors shifted to what Jake thought might be confusion. High school physics? You learned to solve variable gravity field dynamics in your basic education? Well, not exactly, Jake said. But the principles are the same. It's just projectile motion with some extra steps. The professor stared at Jake for another long moment. Report to my office tomorrow at 0800 station time. I will have reviewed your work by then. Jake left the classroom feeling worried. Had he somehow misunderstood the problem? Maybe it was more complicated than he thought. Maybe his simple solution was completely wrong. That evening, Professor Zilthek sat in his office, surrounded by floating holographic displays. Jake's solution hung in the air in front of him. Just 2 pages of relatively simple mathematics. The professor had run the calculations through the university's verification systems 3 times. Each time, the result was the same. Jake's answer was not only correct, it was optimally efficient. The trajectory he had calculated would hit the target with perfect accuracy using the minimum amount of energy. Professor Zilthek called up his own solution to the problem. It covered 47 pages and had taken him 6 days to complete. Jake's solution reached the same conclusion in a fraction of the space. Impossible, the professor muttered. No being can solve this intuitively. The crystal professor opened a communication link to Dr. Yathara, the quantum mechanics expert. Her gaseous form appeared in a holographic display. Yathara, Professor Zilthek said, I need you to review a student's solution. It appears to be correct, but it uses mathematics I do not recognize. Send it to me, Dr. Yathara replied. Her voice sounded like wind through leaves. I will analyze it immediately. Professor Zilthik transmitted Jake's solution. He watched as Dr. Euthara's gaseous form swirled faster and faster as she read through it. "Zilthak," she said finally, "where did this student learn to apply kinematic equations directly to variable gravity fields?" "He claims he learned it in something called high school physics." Professor Zilthek replied. Dr. Euthara's form went completely still. "That is impossible. These concepts require advanced theoretical frameworks. No basic education system teaches them." "That is what I thought," Professor Zilthik said, "yet his solution is mathematically perfect." Meanwhile, Jake sat in his dorm room, trying to study for his other classes, but he couldn't concentrate. He kept thinking about Professor Zilthik's reaction. Maybe he had made a mistake. Maybe the problem was harder than he thought. He pulled up his solution again and went through it step by step. The spinning platform created a Coriolis effect, just like on Earth when the planet rotated. The changing gravity field affected the projectile's path, but you could calculate that using basic calculus. Everything seemed right to him. Jake decided to call his parents on Earth. The communication delay was long because of the distance, but he needed to talk to someone. "Hi, Mom," he said into the video communicator. "How's everything at home?" His mother's face appeared on the screen a few minutes later. "Jake, we're doing great. How's your first week at the university?" Jake told her about his classes and his classmates, but he didn't mention the physics problem. He didn't want to worry her. "I'm proud of you," his mother said. "You're representing all of humanity up there." After the call ended, Jake felt a little better, but he still couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next morning, Jake walked nervously to Professor Zilthek's office. The door was made of the same color-changing metal as the classroom. He knocked softly. "Enter," came the crystal professor's voice. Jake stepped inside. The office was filled with floating displays, showing complex equations and diagrams. Professor Zilthik sat behind a desk that seemed to be made of liquid crystal. "Sit down, Jake Martinez," the professor said. Jake sat in a chair that adjusted itself to his body, just like the ones in the classroom. "I have reviewed your solution," Professor Zilthik began. "It is mathematically correct and optimally efficient." Jake felt relief wash over him. "So I didn't do anything wrong?" "That depends," the professor said. "I need you to explain your methodology. How did you solve this problem?" Jake thought for a moment. "Well, I started by thinking about what was really happening. Something is being shot from a spinning platform, right? So I thought about what that would be like." "Go on," Professor Zilthik said. "It's like throwing a ball while you're on a merry-go-round," Jake explained. "The ball doesn't go straight because you're spinning, so you have to account for that motion." Professor Zilthik's colors shifted. "A merry-go-round?" "It's a playground ride," Jake said. "Kids sit on it, and it spins around. If you throw something while you're on it, the throw gets curved. And the variable gravity field?" Jake shrugged. "That's just like throwing a ball up a hill, except the hill keeps changing steepness. You use basic calculus to figure out how the path changes." Professor Zilthik was quiet for a long time. The colors in the crystal professor's body moved in slow, complex patterns. "Jake Martinez," the professor finally said, "you have solved one of the most challenging problems in theoretical physics using what you call playground analogies. Is that bad?" Jake asked. "No," Professor Zilthik replied. "It is extraordinary. Your classmates are using advanced mathematical frameworks that take days to process. You solved it in hours using basic principles." Jake felt confused, but it wasn't that hard. I mean, the math was a little tricky, but the concept was simple. Professor Zilthik's colors began moving faster. "Simple? Jake Martinez, you have just demonstrated an understanding of physics that most beings in the galaxy consider impossible to grasp intuitively. I don't understand, Jake said. Neither do I, Professor Zilfak admitted. But I intend to find out how a human from a death world can make the impossible look easy. Word about Jake's impossible solution spread quickly through the university. By lunchtime, professors from different departments were talking about the human student who had solved a master's level physics problem using high school math. Jake didn't know about the growing attention. He was sitting in the cafeteria, trying to figure out what to eat. The food service had tried to provide human-friendly options, but some of them looked strange. He settled on something that looked like pasta with red sauce. Human student, voice said behind him. Jake turned around to see a tall, thin being with pale green skin and too many joints in its arms. He recognized it as Dr. Nexual, the silicon-based professor he had seen around campus. May I sit with you? Dr. Nexual asked. Its voice sounded like rocks grinding together. Sure, Jake said, not wanting to be rude. Dr. Nexual sat down carefully. Its body was much heavier than it looked. I have been working on Professor Zilfak's assignment for 3 days. My calculations are not yet complete. Jake almost choked on his pasta. You're working on it too? Several professors are attempting the problem as an intellectual exercise, Dr. Nexual explained. It is considered one of the most challenging theoretical physics problems in the curriculum. Jake felt his stomach drop. Oh, yet you solved it in one evening, Dr. Nexual continued, using mathematics that appear to be elementary. I didn't mean to make anyone look bad, Jake said quickly. Maybe I misunderstood the problem. Dr. Nexual's crystalline eyes studied Jake carefully. Your solution has been verified multiple times. It is correct. What I want to understand is how you approached it so simply. Before Jake could answer, another voice interrupted them. There you are. Jake looked up to see a human woman walking toward their table. She was older than Jake, maybe in her 30s, with dark hair and kind eyes. She wore the blue uniform of university administration. You must be Jake Martinez, she said, sitting down without being invited. I'm Dr. Elena Rodriguez. I'm the human cultural liaison here. Jake felt relieved to see another human. Nice to meet you. Dean Kurthik wants to see you, Dr. Rodriguez said. Right now, Jake's relief disappeared. The dean was the head of the entire university. Am I in trouble? Not exactly, Dr. Rodriguez said. But your homework assignment has caused quite a stir. Dr. Nexual made a sound like grinding stones. The entire theoretical physics department is in chaos. Half the professors think the human cheated. The other half think he has discovered new mathematical principles. Dr. Rodriguez stood up. Come on, Jake. Time to face the music. They walked through the university corridors together. Dr. Rodriguez seemed relaxed, but Jake felt nervous. What? If they decided he didn't belong here? What if they sent him back to Earth? Dr. Rodriguez, Jake said. Did I do something wrong? Call me Elena, she replied. And no, you didn't do anything wrong. You just did something that shouldn't be possible. They reached the dean's office. The door was enormous, at least 4 times taller than Jake. It was covered in symbols from dozens of different alien languages. Elena pressed her hand against a scanner, and the door opened. Inside, the office was huge. The ceiling curved up and away, making Jake feel very small. Strange artifacts from across the galaxy lined the walls. Behind an enormous desk sat Dean Kurthik. The dean was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It had a round body covered in thick, gray skin. 8 long tentacles extended from its sides, each one moving independently. Its eyes were large and yellow, and there were 3 of them. Approach. Human student, Dean Kurthik said. Its voice was deep and rumbling, like distant thunder. Jake walked forward on shaky legs. He stopped in front of the massive desk and tried not to stare at the dean's tentacles. "Jake Martinez," the dean said, "you have created a significant problem for this institution." Jake's heart sank. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to cause trouble." Two of the dean's tentacles waved in what might have been amusement. "You misunderstand. The problem is not with your behavior. The problem is with our understanding of physics education." Elena stepped forward. "Dean, if I may explain." "Please do, Dr. Rodriguez," the dean replied. Elena turned to Jake. "Jake, what kind of planet is Earth classified as?" Jake thought about what Professor Zilthik had said on his first day. "A Class 12 death world." "That's right," Elena said. "Earth is one of the most dangerous planets known to galactic civilization. The gravity is high and variable. The weather is unpredictable and violent. The geology is unstable." Jake nodded. He had learned all this in school, but he had never thought it was unusual. "Most species in the galaxy evolved on stable worlds," Elena continued. "Planets with consistent gravity, predictable weather, and calm environments. Their physics education focuses on theoretical models because they rarely encounter the kind of chaotic physics that exist on Earth." Dean Kurthik's tentacles moved in complex patterns. "Dr. Rodriguez, please explain how this relates to the students." "Impossible solution." "Jake," Elena said, "tell the dean about sports on Earth." Jake looked confused. "Sports? Baseball, basketball, football," Elena prompted. "What do they all have in common?" Jake thought about it. "Well, you have to throw, or kick a ball, and make it go where you want it to go." "While accounting for what factors?" Elena asked. "Wind, gravity, spin, the angle of the throw, ... Jake trailed off as he began to understand. Elena smiled. "Jake, every time you threw a baseball, you were intuitively calculating projectile motion in a variable environment. Every time you shot a basketball, you were accounting for gravitational effects and rotation." Dean Kurthik's three eyes focused intently on Jake. "Continue, Dr. Rodriguez." "Humans don't learn physics from textbooks first," Elena explained. "We learn it from experience. We grow up on a world so chaotic and dangerous that we develop an intuitive understanding of complex physics just to survive." Jake stared at her. "You mean everyone on Earth can solve problems like this?" "Not everyone," Elena said. "But most humans have a better intuitive grasp of practical physics than the galaxy's greatest theoretical physicists." Dean Kurthik was quiet for a long moment. Its tentacles moved slowly, thoughtfully. "Dr. Rodriguez," the dean finally said, "are you suggesting that this human's education on a death world has given him capabilities that our finest academic institutions cannot match?" "That's exactly what I'm suggesting," Elena replied. Jake felt overwhelmed. "But I'm not special. I'm just a regular guy from Ohio." "That's the point," Elena said. "On Earth, being regular means dealing with physics that would baffle most of the galaxy." Dean Kurthik stood up, its massive form casting a shadow over the entire office. "This changes everything we thought we knew about physics education." The dean said, "If humans can solve these problems intuitively, then we have been approaching theoretical physics incorrectly for centuries." The dean's three eyes all focused on Jake. "Jake Martinez, you have not caused a problem. You have provided a solution to a problem we did not know existed." Jake didn't know what to say. He had just wanted to do his homework. 3 weeks later, Jake stood in front of the largest lecture hall in the university. The room could hold over 1,000 students, and today it was completely full. Beings from dozens of species had come to hear the human student explain intuitive physics. Jake's hands were shaking slightly as he looked out at the audience. Professor Zilthik sat in the front row, the crystal being's color shifting in what Jake now knew was excitement. Dean Kurthik was there too, all three eyes focused on Jake. Even Dr. Elena Rodriguez was in attendance, giving him an encouraging smile. "Hello, everyone," Jake began, his voice carrying through the hall's sound system. "3 weeks ago, I thought I was just doing homework. Today, I'm supposed to teach you about physics. I'm still not sure how that happened." A few beings in the audience made sounds that Jake had learned were alien laughter. "Dr. Rodriguez asked me to start by talking about Earth," Jake continued. "Most of you know that Earth is classified as a death world. What you might not know is what that means for someone growing up there." Jake pressed a button on the podium, and a holographic image of Earth appeared above his head. The planet looked beautiful from space, with blue oceans and white clouds. "This looks peaceful," Jake said, "but let me show you what it's really like." The image changed to show a tornado ripping across a flat landscape, then an earthquake shaking buildings, then a hurricane with waves as tall as skyscrapers. "On Earth, the ground moves without warning," Jake explained. "The air moves in patterns that can kill you. Water falls from the sky in amounts that can flood entire cities, and we consider this normal." Jake saw several students in the audience shifting nervously in their seats. "But here's the thing," Jake continued. "Humans don't just survive in this chaos. We play in it." The hologram changed again, showing children playing in a park. Jake watched as the alien audience saw kids throwing balls, running, jumping, and laughing. "This is a human game called baseball," Jake said, as the image showed a player hitting a ball with a wooden stick. The person with the stick has to hit a ball that's moving at over 100 kilometers per hour. The ball is spinning, which makes it curve through the air. The person hitting has less than half a second to decide where the ball will be and swing the stick to hit it. Jake paused and looked out at the audience. Many of the beings were staring at the hologram with what he interpreted as amazement. "Now, let me ask you something," Jake said. "How many of you could calculate the trajectory of a spinning sphere moving at 100 kilometers per hour in less than half a second?" No one in the audience raised a hand or tentacle, or whatever they used to indicate agreement. "But human children do this calculation thousands of times," Jake said. "Not with math, but with intuition. Their brains learn to predict complex physics automatically." Professor Zilvek's colors were shifting rapidly now, the crystal being raised one hand. "Yes, Professor?" Jake asked. "Jake Martinez, Professor." Zilfak said, "Are you saying that human children learn to perform advanced physics calculations subconsciously?" "Exactly," Jake replied. "But we don't think of it as physics. We think of it as playing catch." Jake changed the hologram to show a basketball court. "This is another human game. The goal is to throw a ball through a circular target that's 3 meters above the ground. But you can't just throw it straight, because other players will block it, so you have to arc the ball up and over them." The image showed a player jumping and shooting the ball in a high curve that dropped perfectly through the basket. "Every time a human makes that shot," Jake explained, "they're calculating projectile motion, gravitational effects, and air resistance. They're doing it by feel, but the math is there." Velinari, the blue aquatic being, floated up from its seat. "Human Jake," it said in its bubble-popping voice, "how do human children learn to make these calculations?" Jake thought about the question. "They don't learn it," he said finally. "They just do it. From the time we can walk, we're throwing things, catching things, jumping over things. Our brains develop an understanding of physics through experience." "But why do human brains develop this way?" asked Krexter, the insectoid being. Its many voices spoke together. "Our species evolved on a stable world. We learned to solve problems through careful analysis." Jake nodded. "That's exactly the difference. Your world was stable, so your species developed analytical thinking. Earth is chaotic, so humans developed intuitive physics. We had to, or we wouldn't survive." Jake changed the hologram to show children playing on a playground. "Look at this," he said. Human children spend hours on equipment that would terrify most species. They swing from bars, slide down ramps, balance on narrow beams. The image showed a child going down a twisting slide, automatically adjusting their body position to navigate. The curves. Every time they do this, Jake explained, they're learning about momentum, friction, and angular velocity. Not from books, but from their bodies. Dean Kurthag's tentacles moved in complex patterns. "Jake Martinez," the dean said, "this suggests that human education should be completely different from galactic standard education." "Maybe," Jake said, "but I think there's something both sides can learn." Jake pressed another button, and the hologram changed to show the physics problem that had started everything. The complex equations floated in the air. "When I first saw this problem," Jake said, "I didn't see equations. I saw a story. Something was being thrown from a spinning platform in changing gravity. So I thought about similar situations I had experienced." Jake walked closer to the audience. "I remembered being on a merry-go-round as a kid and trying to throw a ball to my dad. The ball never went where I expected because the ride was spinning. I remembered playing miniature golf on courses with moving obstacles and changing slopes." Professor Zilthik stood up. "But Jake Martinez, how did you translate those experiences into mathematical solutions?" Jake smiled. "That's the thing, Professor. I didn't translate them. The math was already there in my understanding. I just had to write it down." Jake turned to address the entire audience. "I think the problem is that galactic education tries to teach physics from the top down. You start with complex theories and work toward applications. Humans learn from the bottom up. We start with experience and build theories to explain what we already understand." A gaseous being in a containment suit floated up from the back of the hall. Jake recognized Dr. Yithara. "Human student," she said in her wind-like voice, "are you suggesting that intuitive understanding is superior to theoretical analysis?" Jake shook his head. "No, not superior. Different. Both approaches have value." Jake gestured toward Velinari. "Velinari, you've been working on understanding intuitive physics for the past 3 weeks. How has it been going?" The blue beings. 6 arms moved in. What Jake had learned was embarrassment. "It is difficult," Velinari admitted. "My species thinks in mathematical structures. Learning to feel physics is very strange." "But you're making progress," Jake encouraged. "Yesterday, you managed to throw a ball in a straight line." "This is true," Velinari said, sounding proud. "It only took me 47 attempts." The audience made various sounds of amusement. Jake turned to Krexter. "And your hive mind has been experimenting with collective intuition. How is that working?" Krexter S. Many eyes blinked in sequence. "We are learning to reduce analytical processing and increase experiential data gathering. It is uncomfortable but educational." Jake nodded. "See, that's the thing. Neither approach is wrong. They're just different ways of understanding the same universe." Jake pressed the button one more time, and the hologram changed to show both human children playing and alien students studying. "Humans need to learn theoretical frameworks," Jake said. "Our intuitive understanding can only take us so far. We need the mathematical tools that galactic education provides." He gestured toward the alien students in the image. "But maybe galactic education could benefit from more experiential learning. Not every problem needs to be solved with pure theory." Dean Kurthik stood up, all 3 eyes focused on Jake. "Jake Martinez, you have given us much to consider. The university will be implementing new curriculum based on your insights." Jake felt a moment of panic. "I hope I haven't messed anything up." Professor Zultik's colors shifted to what Jake now recognized as amusement. "Jake Martinez, you have not messed anything up. You have opened our minds to new possibilities." As the lecture ended and the audience began to leave, Jake felt a sense of accomplishment. He had come to the university thinking he would learn from the galaxy's greatest minds. Instead, he had discovered that sometimes the best teacher is experience itself. Velinari floated over to him as he packed up his materials. "Human Jake," the blue being said, "would you teach me more about this plane catch? I want to understand how human children learn physics so easily." Jake grinned. "Sure, but we'll need to get you a waterproof ball." As they walked out of the lecture hall together, Jake realized that his easy homework had done more than baffle an alien classroom. It had built a bridge between two completely different ways of understanding the universe. And sometimes, Jake thought, that's the most important kind of education there is.